Hello IP3, welcome to week 5 of our science review lessons. I'm Teacher Joe and today we are going to start a new chapter. So in chapter 1 we talked about plants and in chapter 2 we talked about animals. Now chapter 3 is about life cycles. So that takes information that we learned about plants and about animals and we look at the life cycles of different plants and different animals. So let's get started. Okay, so IP3 Summer 2020 Review, Science Chapter 3, Life Cycles, and in Lesson 1 we're going to look at the life cycles of flowering plants, specifically an apple tree, and we're going to look at insects, specifically a butterfly. Okay, first of all, what are life cycles? A life cycle is the series of changes that a plant or an animal goes through during its lifetime. So, during your lifetime, or during any plant or during any animal's lifetime, it does not stay the same. It does not look the same when it is old as when it is young. Everything, all living things go through changes. And a life cycle shows us what those changes are. So we're going to learn about the life cycles of different living things, and today we're looking at apple trees and butterflies. So, flowering plants, like apple trees, have similar life cycles. An apple tree is a flowering plant, and that's the example that we're going to look at, apple tree. But other plants that have flowers, maybe not exactly the same life cycle, but they do have a similar life cycle. So here you can see the basic outline of the life cycle of an apple tree. We'll talk about this in more detail. You start with a seed, then the seed starts to grow a few leaves. Eventually it becomes a seedling. Then it is a small tree or a sapling, and it grows and grows until it becomes a mature adult tree. That adult tree grows apples. These apples fall to the ground and they contain seeds, and this cycle continues on and on. Okay, so first, a flower or blossom is the part of the plant that makes fruit and seeds, and the seed is the first stage in most plants. So here you can see a flower on the left, and you might not think of flowers on an apple tree, but they do have flowers that help to produce the fruit. And these are seeds. I think these are the seeds of an apple. Okay. For a plant to make seeds, pollen needs to move from one part of the flower to another. Now, pollen is this powdery yellow material you can see inside this sunflower. Pollen can be moved by wind, by insects like this bee, and sometimes other animals. So pollen, this powdery stuff, needs to move from one part of the flower to another, and it needs something else like wind or an animal to help it. Now, not all flowering plants produce fruit, but some do. And fruit is the part of the plant that contains the seed. Its job is to protect it. So, in an apple which you eat, when you get to the middle, you have these seeds. Now, the job of the apple, the fruit, is partly to protect the seeds, but also it's so that if an animal eats this fruit, it has the seed inside its body, then it goes off to another place, does a big poo, and the seed is in the poo, and that can help the new tree grow. So seeds inside an apple, they can grow into a new apple tree. When the seed is planted, or when it's left somewhere by another animal, it will sprout and turn into a seedling. Seedling is like a baby tree. And then it gets a little bit bigger and grows into a sapling. The sapling is like a teenager, like not quite a fully adult tree, but bigger than a baby tree, bigger than a seedling. And then eventually you've got your adult tree. It can produce fruit and seeds, the fruit and the seeds move to different places, and then you grow new trees. So the cycle continues. You need an adult to produce a seed, you need a seed to produce an adult. So it has to keep going on like that. That's why we call it a cycle. It goes around and around. Insects. All insects have similar life cycles. They are born, they grow, they reproduce, and then they die. But butterflies, they go through more changes than most of the animals. So they have a more interesting life cycle than lots of other insects. So that's why we're going to look at them. So again, you can see the basic outline of the life cycle. You have an egg, which grows on a leaf. Out of that egg hatches a caterpillar. The caterpillar lives for a little while, it eats and eats and eats, and eventually it grows into a chrysalis, or a pupa. And stays like this for a few months, it hibernates, and then an adult butterfly emerges from that chrysalis. So it completely changes form between caterpillar and butterfly. These two insects look completely different, but they are actually the same species. And then that adult butterfly can produce eggs, and again the cycle goes around and around and around. So the first stage in the life cycle of most insects is the egg, and the adult butterfly lays its egg on leaves. The second stage is the larva. We call this stage the larva stage. At this stage, the larva is called a caterpillar, and it hatches from that egg that we just saw. It has a worm-like body, and it eats plants because it needs to have a lot of energy so it can grow and so it can store that energy for later. So caterpillars eat lots and lots of plants. You might remember we watched a video called The Very Hungry Caterpillar. You might want to go Google that video and watch it for yourself later. The third stage is called the pupa stage. The caterpillar becomes a pupa. It makes a hard case for itself, and that case is called a chrysalis. That chrysalis protects the caterpillar inside, because while it's inside that chrysalis, the caterpillar turns into an adult butterfly. It turns into like this weird goo. It's weird. And then it completely changes into a butterfly. So inside that chrysalis, a big change, a metamorphosis happens. So while it's inside that chrysalis, it doesn't eat much, well, it doesn't eat at all, and it doesn't move much. Eventually, we get the fourth and final stage, the adult stage. The adult butterfly emerges, comes out of this chrysalis. It looks completely different to all of the other stages. Before we had an egg, then we had a caterpillar, which looks a bit like a worm. Then you got this shell, the chrysalis, but then you've got an adult butterfly. It looks completely different. It's got wings, it's got long legs, and it's got antennae sticking out of its head. And so that butterfly can reproduce. It can lay eggs on leaves, and then those eggs hatch into caterpillars, which turn into chrysalises, which then turn into butterflies. So again, we've got a cycle. It keeps continuing. But when an adult butterfly lays its egg, then it dies. Okay, IP3, that is the end of our lecture. But before we go, I'm just going to explain your homework. So, you should have this worksheet, IP3 Science Chapter 3, Life Cycles Review Worksheet Week 5. Section 1, quite easy. You have 4 sentences with 4 gaps, 4 words, so fill the space with a word. So a something shows the stages a plant or animal goes through during its lifetime. You tell me. Okay, section 2, you have the 4 stages in the life cycle of an apple tree, and you need to put those stages into the correct order. So again, sapling, seed, adult tree, seedling. You got 5, 6, 7, and 8. Put them into the correct order. Make sure you follow the arrows. This is number 7, this is number 8. Section 3, you have to do quite a lot of work. So in this space, all of this space, this empty page, I want you to draw and label the complete life cycle of a butterfly, and I want you to tell me what happens at each stage of that life cycle. So I'm going to give you 2 points for correct ordering and labeling, so putting everything in the correct place. I'm going to give you 3 points for how good your explanations are, so I want to see you writing incomplete sentences. Then 2 points for how good your drawings are. I want to see your best work, lots of effort. That means this section is worth 7 points in total, making this worksheet out of 15. So I want to see good work in your butterfly life cycles. Okay, IP3, that is the end of this week's lesson. I hope you've all understood and that you understand the life cycles of apple trees and butterflies. We're going to look at some more life cycles next week, but until then, bye-bye IP3.